Making headlines at this hour. Korea's main rival parties strike an 11th-hour deal on a critical bill redrawing electoral districts for April's general elections. The bill will be put up for vote on Friday. Korea's main opposition kicks off a filibuster during a parliamentary session today in protest against the Assembly Speaker's earlier decision to use his authority to put a long-stalled counterterrorism bill to vote. And Seoul and Washington postpone talks in deploying a sophisticated missile defense system as top diplomats of the U.S. and China are set for a meeting tomorrow to discuss North Korea. NewsCenter begins right now. It is 8 a.m. in New York, 12 noon in London, and 10 on a Tuesday night here in Seoul. Hello and welcome to our viewers all across the globe. You're watching Arirang News Center. Let's begin in Parliament. The National Assembly is still holding a session that's continued into the late evening right now. In a show of discontent, the main opposition party has launched a filibuster to stall a legislative proceedings in a contentious counterterrorism bill. Of course, the National Assembly Speaker used his authority to bring this counterterrorism bill for a vote directly to the floor. Our Shin Se-min, our parliamentary correspondent, is following this story at the National Assembly, and we go live to her. Se-min, can we expect the session to end anytime soon?
Geun-hye, good evening. It doesn't look like it's going to end anytime soon. Just a little over 3 hours ago, the delayed regular session here at the Parliament kicked off. Now, as I said, with the filibuster in action, it doesn't look like it's going to end anytime soon. Now, just a little over 3 hours ago, at around 7 p.m. this afternoon, the session began with the National Assembly Speaker Geun-hye saying that it's almost impossible to have the two rival political parties compromising on the issue of counterterrorism. Now, with it, the Speaker implemented his authority to put the bill to a plenary vote, something that he has announced earlier in the day. And it's also what invoked the main opposition, the Minju Party of Korea, to request a filibuster later in the day to stall the legislative proceedings. Now, the main opposition camp is certain that they will continue the standoff by taking turns to deliver some 5-hour-long speeches until the February extraordinary session ends, which is scheduled to end on March 10th. Now, at the same time, the ruling Geunhye Party is on full standby, just waiting for the filibuster to end. Now, they've reiterated their determination to eventually gather for a full plenary vote afterwards.
Now, Se-min, this is not something we see every day on a daily basis at the National Assembly. Lawmakers going through hours-long sessions, not knowing when it will end. Now, what you said about the opposition party continuing the filibuster until early next month, is that something possible? Is it something that we should look out for?
Well, theoretically, yes, but with just 50 days left until the April 13th general election, and with the two rival parties agreeing on the country's new electoral map this Tuesday, it's unlikely that they will continue it through then, because that new electoral map is scheduled to be put to a vote at the session scheduled for this Friday. Now, and to give you a little bit more background, the issue of counterterrorism bill is something that had been putting all stops to the legislative procedures up until recently. For one, the disagreements between the parties over the counterterrorism bill had been the main sticking point for the electoral map bill until the last minute. The counterterrorism bill will establish an anti-terrorism center within the country's top spy agency, the National Intelligence Service, of which the opposition camp is claiming that it will only empower the agency to make it easier for the government to read into the people's bank accounts and wiretap and phones. The ruling party and the government, however, have been urging for the passage of the Counterterrorism Act, as it will help protect the country from potential terror threats coming from the north and elsewhere. With the parliament at a standstill again, it is unclear whether the rival parties will even vote on and agreed upon the North Korean Human Rights Bill along with some 70 other non-contentious bills. That's all I have for me now. This is Shin Se-min reporting live from the National Assembly.
Thank you, Se-min. That was our Shin Se-min from the National Assembly. Now, but the rival parties, as our Se-min mentioned, did manage to strike a last-minute deal on the nation's new electoral district map. The map, which redraws regional boundaries and designates parliamentary seats, is expected to be put on vote this Friday. Oh Soo-young gives us the details of how the agreement came about and what changes will be made and where.
Korea's main rival parties reached an agreement Monday morning on a new electoral map, with just 50 days left before the general elections in April.
Despite our differences, we came to an agreement because the general election needs to move forward without any more setbacks.
This morning, Saenuri Party leader Kim Moo-sung, the National Assembly Speaker, and I held consultations and agreed on changes to the election law revision bill.
The redistricting plan will leave the total number of assembly seats at 300, with 253 seats allocated for district representatives. This reduces the number of seats designated for proportional representatives to 47. By district, Gyeonggi-do province saw the highest increase of seats in parliament, up 8 from last year. Meanwhile, Gangwon-do, Jeollabuk-do and Jeollanam-do provinces all lost a seat. Gyeongsangbuk-do province lost 2. The previous electoral map was scrapped at the end of last year to be redrawn to reflect population changes.
Adjusting the seats this time around balances out disproportionate representation. Although late, it's a positive move because it means the election system is more democratic.
Bipartisan clashes over changes to the proportional representation system, as well as other key pending bills, has stalled work on revising the electoral map for months. As lawmakers missed several deadlines, many, including candidates, feared the upcoming election would be postponed. A final version of the new electoral map has been submitted to the National Election Commission for review.
Now the task is making sure that electoral boundaries are fairly drawn for the benefit of the voters, not for partisan interests.
The bill will be put to a vote at a plenary session on Friday. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
South Korea and the U.S. were set to sign an agreement early today to start talks on the potential deployment of a THAAD battery on the Korean peninsula, a move opposed by China. Now, but the highly anticipated event was abruptly postponed. Seoul said that it needed more time for final adjustments. Well, experts speculate otherwise, as top diplomats of the U.S. and China are set for a meeting tomorrow to discuss North Korea.
South Korea and the U.S. have abruptly delayed signing an agreement on setting up a joint working group that'll discuss the deployment of an American terminal high-altitude area defense system to South Korea. Seoul announced a postponement Tuesday, shortly before the accord was scheduled to be signed.
The related accord is in its final stages. The agreement is expected to come within a day or two, as some specifics need to be ironed out.
This setback is gaining attention as it coincides with Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi's meeting with U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry in Washington. China has long been against the deployment of a THAAD system in South Korea, given that the radar system can cover half of its mainland area.
The postponement is seen as an act to refrain from provoking China ahead of a meeting to adjust the level of sanctions on North Korea from the UN Security Council.
China's strong opposition was echoed by its ambassador to South Korea. Chu Go-hong warned the deployment could destroy Seoul-Beijing ties, adding that Seoul should thoroughly consider whether its security will be guaranteed. Seoul and Washington have maintained that the U.S.-made missile defense system will only be used against North Korean missiles. Deterring against the North's threats has risen as a focus between the two allies in the wake of Pyongyang's latest nuclear and long-range missile tests. Seoul and Washington are set to discuss details about cost-sharing and location of a THAAD system deployment when talks get underway. But experts say China may be holding up the process. Many are watching to see whether a compromise can be reached with Beijing in bringing the U.S.-made anti-ballistic missile system to South Korea. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Well, that talks may be on a temporary hold, but South Korea and the U.S. are still pushing forward with the discussions on how to counter North Korea's recent threats. Seoul and Washington held a working-level talks in the South Korean capital today, where the two sides discussed measures against Pyongyang for its nuclear and long-range missile tests, including ways to effectively enforce sanctions on Pyongyang. Well, the official from the U.S. also briefed her South Korean counterpart on the implementation process of the North Korea Sanctions Enforcement Act of 2016, the first bipartisan U.S. legislation that exclusively targets North Korea, recently signed by U.S. President Barack Obama. South Korea has made clear that it will not arm itself with nuclear weapons as the nation stands strongly committed to nonproliferation. This comes amid calls by some experts that nuclear armament by Seoul would be an effective deterrent against threats from North Korea. Our Kim Min-ji has more on the Foreign Ministry's announcement today, as well as remarks by this country's defense chief that North Korea may be readying itself for another long-range rocket launch.
South Korea is firmly committed to nuclear non-proliferation. That's according to Seoul's foreign ministry, which on Tuesday dismissed calls for the country to build its own nuclear arsenal to counter North Korea's nuclear and missile threats.
You could say the call for nuclear armament comes from experts' frustrations with how to deter North Korea, which has conducted 4 nuclear tests and its recent long-range missile launch. Our government is actively contributing to global nuclear non-proliferation and working to strengthen it.
The spokesperson went on to say that South Korea is covered under the U.S. nuclear umbrella, and in a crisis, the two sides will step up their defense readiness. In regards to recent reports that the U.S. and North Korea exchanged views last year over Pyongyang's proposal to start peace treaty talks, the spokesperson said it could be discussed so long as the North makes progress towards denuclearization. Meanwhile, Seoul's defense minister says North Korea might be preparing to launch a larger long-range missile. During a meeting of the Parliamentary Defense Committee, Defense Minister Han Min-gu said there is a possibility that Pyongyang could conduct a launch in order to achieve its military goals. Han noted that last year the North raised the height of a launch pad at its Dongchangli rocket launch facility, located off its west coast, from 50 meters to 67. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
And this just coming in, North Korea released a statement warning South Korea and the U.S. to stop threatening it for its recent nuclear missile tests, saying it will take measures against these countries in case of military actions. Our defense correspondent Kim Hyun-bin reports.
North Korea has denounced actions that tried to punish the regime for its recent nuclear test and missile launch, which Pyongyang claims was successful hydrogen bomb test and launch of a satellite. The Korean Central News Agency released a statement by the Supreme Command of the North Korean People's Army Tuesday, warning that, quote, if enemy special forces or operation hardware show slight movement, we'll take prior military action to dominate our foes. Referring to the annual Seoul-Washington joint military drills, the Key Resolve and Full Eagle, slated to begin in early March. The statement went on to say that from this moment on, key institutions, including the presidential office of Geunhye, will become primary targets. The statement also denounced the U.S. and South Korea specifically, saying it is gambling with its actions, such as the UN Security Council's movements, on adopting a new resolution against the regime. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
President Park Geun-hye enters her 4th year in office this week, and we're taking this week to assess and analyze President Park's 3 years in office, as well as the challenges ahead in the years ahead. Tonight, in the second of our 5-part special series, our foreign affairs correspondent Kwon So-ah sheds light on the Park administration's diplomatic policy.
Negotiations, handshakes, and agreements with leaders from across the world. Some 30 overseas trips in 3 years, more than any other South Korean president in history. Efforts to bolster Korea's relations with its foreign partners, building international consensus on reunification of the two Koreas, and cooperation on denuclearizing the North have been key goals on the Park administration's diplomatic front. The terms summit diplomacy, sales diplomacy, and unification diplomacy have been omnipresent during President Park's 3 years in office. This concentration on diplomatic performance reinforced relationships with the U.S., assessed as being at an all-time high, as well as with China, particularly on business matters, with the effectuation of the Seoul-Beijing Free Trade Agreement.
I think she was wise to, early in her term, make a couple of trips to China and cultivate a good relationship with Chinese President Xi Jinping. She seems to have a pretty good relationship with Barack Obama. But other than that, I would have to just say that the relationship with China is the biggest one, which is appropriate because China is becoming more and more important to the South Korean economy and South Korean politics in general. China is often pointed to as the country that has the most influence over North Korea.
But in the wake of North Korea's recent nuclear and long-range missile tests, experts have noted the lack of cooperation from China in global efforts led by President Park to punish Pyongyang for its continuous violations of UN resolutions.
I think she finally realized that China would not take care of South Korea's interests much compared to Chinese own interests. I think now she's moving towards some different trajectory of her policies so that the resultant objective of her policy would be more pragmatic rather than something based upon a trust or some higher expectations on other neighboring superpowers.
Precariously positioned between global superpowers, the U.S. and China, Korea's approach in dealing with North Korea is seen as crucial.
Some recommendations I have is, why don't we have South Korea, North Korea, U.S. trilateral dialogue? It is the U.S., not China, that North Korea wants to have a dialogue with. So I think throughout the trilateral dialogue among North, South, and the U.S., maybe we can share and increase our separate objectives into a more common objectives.
While North Korea remains under the international spotlight, President Park will also have to face other challenges in her 4th year, one being follow-up measures to the so-called comfort women issue. Less than 2 months after President Park and her Japanese counterpart Shinzo Abe's first summit meeting, the landmark deal was struck to settle Japan's sexual enslavement of South Korean women before and during World War II. Despite the apology on behalf of the Japanese government and compensation of 1 billion yen, roughly $8.8 million, issues remain, including Japan's recent report to the UN denying the existence of records on the military's forced recruitment of wartime sex slaves. Unsolved territorial issues with Japan, as well as ongoing talks between Seoul and Beijing on a maritime demarcation line, are also tasks that must be addressed during the remainder of Park's term in office.
While it's good that President Park has firm stances on issues related to North Korea and China, I also think she should be a bit more flexible.
As we are in a transition period and a power struggle between the US and China, I hope South Korea strengthens its diplomatic front.
Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
Job creation and economic revitalization. These are two goals that President Park Geun-hye asked government officials to keep in mind when working on national policies. As the president rounds out her 3rd year in office, she called on her government to take on a more supportive role that will benefit the country's future. Our correspondent at the top office, Song Ji-sun, reports.
Thursday marks President Park Geun-hye's 3rd year anniversary at the top office. Looking to the year ahead, 2016 is the finish line for her 3-year economic innovation plan and 4 major reforms in the finance, labor, education, and public sectors. At a seminar on the government's key reform tasks, she called on public officials to think about job creation and economic revitalization, the 2 goals that need to be kept in mind when reviewing regulations or drafting new policies. While acknowledging the current period of low growth, the president pointed out that the country is entering an era of new, rising sectors, stressing the need for timely deregulation to support new growth engines. To that end, the national chain of 17 innovation centers will play their part. They have already attracted over $100 million in investment, while helping nearly 600 startups turn their ideas into businesses. President Park urged government officials to put all efforts into nurturing this change and make history. She said they were at a deciding moment that would determine whether Korea can take another leap or sink.
Stressing that the role of a government changes with time, President Park suggested that the government should no longer be a regulatory authority, but rather a pillar of support for new growth engines and industries. 송지선, Arirang News.
A new report from the OECD attempts to measure quality jobs in the country. Korea not doing so well. The average hourly wage workers receive here remain rooted in the lower rank among the 33 member nations surveyed. Hwang Ji-hye shares with us the results.
Roughly $14.5 US. That's how much the average Korean worker earns in an hour, which is only about half of what workers in Germany make. According to a job quality report by the OECD, Korea's purchasing power parity adjusted gross hourly earnings ranked 22nd, remaining in the lower tier among the 33 member countries. Topping the list were European countries like Luxembourg, the Netherlands, and Switzerland, while Mexico sat at the bottom. The OECD's measure gauges how employment contributes to material living conditions, or in other words, workers' well-being, and how the earnings are distributed across the workforce. And experts attribute Korea's rather disappointing scorecard to long working hours coupled with low productivity. The OECD says Korean employees worked for around 2,100 hours on average in 2014, the world's second longest after Mexico, and well over the 1,300 hours German people spent at work that year. Experts add it's inevitable longer working hours will result in slipping productivity. They say local companies should stop insisting on their employees working extreme amounts of overtime. Hwang Ji-hye, Arirang News.
It's the second day of the Mobile World Congress, one of the world's largest tech events currently taking place in Barcelona. Our very own Kim Ji-yeon is on site. She joins us from the venue. Ji-yeon, I can see that the event is turning out to be a very popular one. Tell us where you are standing right now and what is dominating the Mobile World Congress this year?
I'm at hall number 3, one of the most crowded sites at this year's MWC. Around me, you can see the world's leading IT companies like Samsung and Huawei showing off their latest gadgets.
Mobile is everything. This is the theme for this year's Mobile World Congress. It conveys that innovation in the mobile sector is reaching into our daily lives, and that there are very few things being created today that don't somehow have a mobile component to them, and this includes the virtual reality sector.
This year's MWC has put the spotlight on VR devices, so it's no surprise the world's largest smartphone maker, Samsung Electronics, has its own VR experience corner.
At Samsung's 4D Experience Center, visitors wait in a long line so they can take a virtual ride on a snow vehicle or roller coaster. Users put on the Gear VR headsets, which generate 360-degree images with every move and turn that's made. The Korean tech giant is eyeing the VR sector for growth, teaming up with Facebook for its VR contents. Still, the VR sector remains in its infant stage and needs more user-friendly VR devices and faster connectivity to produce higher resolutions. For that, companies like Korea-based SK Telecom have introduced a 5th-generation 5G network, an improved version from the current 4th-generation LTE network.
So more than 100 times rather than 4G network. So it should be. So for example, so if you download the HD movie parts, if you use the LTE network, so you can spend around 60 seconds or so around 1 minute. But if you use the 5G network, so within 1 second you can download it.
Another company that's providing 5G connectivity is US-based Qualcomm. They say their annual trip to Barcelona is a great business opportunity.
So we actually speak to operators and vendors from around the world throughout the year. But Mobile World Congress gives us a really great opportunity where we can have influential members from all these communities all in one place. It makes it easy for us to display all the great things we're working on all in one place, rather than have them travel around the world at different times.
SK Telecom and its local rival, KT Corporation, led discussions at the MWC to formulate a global standard platform for the fifth-generation network.
And companies SK Telecom and KT Telecom are providing full 5G services at the upcoming 2018 Winter Olympics taking place in Pyeongchang, Korea. Geun-hye?
Well, I thought 4G was fast enough. I can only imagine how speedy of an internet connection 5G will provide us come Olympic season. Thank you, Jian, for that. That was our Kim Jian from Barcelona, Spain. A U.S. think tank says a recent satellite imagery shows China may be building a high-frequency radar system in the South China Sea. Bruce Harrison is live with me in the studio with more on that story. Now, Bruce, a Chinese radar installment in those disputed waters would further complicate the balance of power in this region, wouldn't it?
That's right, Geun-hye. The area where this is being built in the Spratly Islands is located near some major international shipping lanes. According to the Washington Center for Strategic and International Studies, the images show construction of facilities are nearly complete. Beijing responded to questions about the radar, saying China has every right to build on its own territory.
The United States talks about freedom of navigation, but I fear in its heart what it's thinking about is absolute maritime hegemony.
The think tank's report says a high-frequency radar would increase China's ability to monitor sea and air traffic coming from the south and other important channels in that region. Polls open shortly in the U.S. state of Nevada, the final primary contest for Republicans ahead of a major voting day next week known as Super Tuesday. New York billionaire Donald Trump heads into the primary with a major lead, with Senators Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio polling closely in second place. Missteps by the Cruz campaign could help Rubio in Nevada this week. Cruz asked his spokesperson to step down this week over a story about Rubio.
Yesterday, a staffer from our campaign sent out a tweet that tweeted a news story that purported to indicate Marco saying something negative about the Bible. The news story was false.
Nevada comes a week before Super Tuesday, when more than a dozen states vote in either primaries or caucuses. Nearly 600 delegates are at stake for Republicans and more than 1,000 for Democrats.
So, Bruce, tell us, how often in the past have the candidates who won the most delegates on Super Tuesday really won their party nomination?
More often than not, the victor on Super Tuesday has gone on to win the party nomination. But the thing about Super Tuesday is the number of states primarying or caucusing that day differ every year. There's a significant number this year, 14. So whoever wins, there's a good chance they're going to win this summer at the party nominating contest.
All right, March 1st it is. Thank you, Bruce, for that.
No problem.
When you use that delivery app to get your meal delivered tonight or shared your favorite recipe on the internet, you've just made use of food technology. Everything from food packaging, delivery, and shopping are branches of food technology which has made people's lives much easier and much more efficient. But what does the future hold for food tech? Our news feature tonight with Lee Ji-won.
Food. Technology. Food technology is a branch of food science that uses technology to enhance quality, delivery, packaging, and the list is expanding.
Food technology has been around for a long time. Canning foods to preserve them is an example. Technology has evolved and expanded into various industries, from shopping for ingredients to distribution and processing of foods. Food technology increases efficiency and the quality of products.
In Korea, food technology is most widely associated with delivery services. Through websites and applications, a variety of delivery services are available for consumers to get whatever they want, from ingredients to ready-made meals with just a click. Websites and applications for sharing recipes are also popular. Targeting single-person households, these applications allow users to easily follow a recipe, like providing video instruction. Using their own ingredients in smaller portions, consumers can enjoy their favorite meals in a cheaper and more creative way.
These days, people want to eat good meals that can be prepared quickly, so convenience is key. Food tech makes this possible. People can easily have their dish delivered to them or cook them at home.
Food tech is also being utilized in the order-taking and reservation processes. To save time, people can use mobile services to order their drinks before getting to the cafe or make reservations at restaurants. These services also provide information on the restaurants, helping consumers make better decisions.
From food delivery to mobile order services, there has been a wide range of innovation in the industry. But what's next for food tech?
Food technology had been mostly focused on delivery services and cooking, but now the technology is being applied to production. This is a tomato farm in Chungcheongbuk-do province, and one of the first to apply smart farming techniques. Smart Farm utilizes technology to control the environment on the farm remotely.
Now I can go to the hospital or places far away without worrying because I can monitor and control my farm from wherever I am. Plus, we can also make small and quick changes to perfectly suit the environment for the crops.
After installing the Smart Farm terminal, farmers can use their smartphones to remotely control greenhouse doors as well as the temperature and humidity. Farmers can also view their farm on their phones and receive information in cases of emergency.
We believe Smart Farm is the very first stage of food tech. Farmers have been very satisfied after implementing the system on their farms. The quality of crops is very high, and it is easier to maintain the greenhouse. It also reduces labor cost. We plan to implement the technology on more farms.
With the Rural Development Administration subsidizing 100% of the cost of implementing the system, more farms are expected to show interest. As food tech becomes more prevalent in daily life, it will be exciting to see just how much this science develops in the future. 이지원, 아리랑 뉴스.
Time now to get a check on the weather conditions. Geun, so instead of getting warmer, it feels like we're back to winter again.
I know, it does feel like we're heading back to winter. In fact, a brief cold snap is in the forecast for tomorrow.
Right, it's something that some of us refer to as a blackberry winter, but can you give us a brief outlook of what the weather is going to be like?
Sure. Well, March is only about a week away. Usually in early spring here in Korea, a cold snap or 꽃샘추위 sets in early in the month for 3 to 4 days, but it could linger until April this year. But thankfully, we'll have less dusty days because heavy snow on the arid desert regions of China and Mongolia, which is where we get the yellow dust from. And summer-like conditions, however, will begin early this year in May, but it's definitely not going to feel like summer tomorrow. A cold snap is expected with a low of -7 degrees Celsius here in the capital, and other regions will also have a very chilly day tomorrow along with strong gusty winds. So let's take a closer look. So while daily low here in Seoul will kick off at -7, Daegu will start off the day at -3 and -2 for Busan. And as for the daily highs, the Seoul will peak at 1 degree Celsius, 6 for Daegu and Busan, and 4 is the top temperature over in Jeju Island. Now that's Korea for you, and here's a look at the weather conditions around the world.
Well, that is our broadcast on this Tuesday night. Make sure you bundle up for the freezing temperatures tomorrow morning. I'm Moon Gun-young. Thank you as always for watching, and we hope to see you right back here, same time tomorrow on NewsCenter.